It chooses you, in silence, in desperation, in the hour when there is no food left, when no one calls your name anymore, when the road behind you has burned down to ash and the one ahead offers nothing but shadows. We talk about assassins like they're born for it, like they're carved from stone and smoke. But that's the kind of lie you tell yourself when you want the world to make sense. No banners, no brotherhood, no sacred vow to justice. Just the slow erosion of everything that made you human, until the only thing left is instinct and a blade you wish you could forget. The truth is uglier. Some say it started in the gutters of Prague. Others say it began in the mountains outside Genoa. The truth? It began in a place so poor it didn't have a name. A bend in the river, a scar on the map. A village where hunger was so constant it became a lullaby, whispered into the ears of children whose ribs pressed against their skin like prison bars. That's where we find him. A boy with no shoes, mud-caked knees, fingers so thin they trembled under their own weight. His name? No one remembers. That's the first thing the world takes from you. Not your pride, not your peace, your name, yourself. One day, you're someone's son. The next, you're just a pair of eyes in the dark. He watched his mother die with a rag in her mouth, not to keep her quiet, but to keep her from biting her own tongue in the throes of fever. He didn't cry, not because he was brave, because he was empty, because grief is a luxury the starving can't afford. When the crops failed and the sky turned black with ash, the boy did what others couldn't. He survived. And survival, back then, meant becoming invisible. You don't scream when they take your sister. You don't speak when the soldiers spit in your food. You don't blink when a priest steals your last loaf of bread and says it was God's will. You stay quiet. You learn to listen more than you speak. You learn to disappear. He slept in stables, drank from horse troughs, ate whatever the rats didn't claim first, and when the cold came, and it always came, he moved south, where the winters were kinder, but the knives were not. They say his first kill was in Marseille, a spice merchant, rich with Turkish silver, who caught him stealing figs. The merchant grabbed him by the hair, raised a cane, and the boy, trembling, teeth chattering, skin stretched thin over sharp bones, reached into the fruit basket and pulled out a paring knife. They found the merchant hours later, face buried in blood, eyes wide with surprise. No one asked who did it. No one cared. One less merchant. One more open stall. The city moved on. But something had shifted. The boy felt it. Not triumph, not guilt. Something quieter, something colder. The kind of silence that fills your lungs and never leaves. He didn't speak for 3 days. Didn't sleep for 6. And when he finally did, he dreamed of warm blood on cold cobblestone. That's when they came. The man wore gray. Not noble gray. Not silk, wool, stained with old rain. A cloak that dragged through dirt and never got noticed. He didn't introduce himself, just watched. Watched how the boy never begged. How he moved through crowds without drawing a single stare. How he sat with his back against the stone wall, always facing the street, always within reach of something sharp. "You're already halfway dead," the man said, voice like gravel and wine. "Might as well make it useful." The boy didn't answer. Didn't need to. That night, he followed the man. Down alleys that bent like broken limbs. Through trap doors. Beneath the bones of the city. Into a world that didn't want names. They didn't call it a guild. They didn't call it anything. There were rules, though. No killing for pleasure, no children, no mistakes. Each life had a price. Each death had a silence. Training wasn't the fantasy stories make it out to be. No mountain temples. No sacred oaths, just blood, repetition, suffering. You held your breath until your vision went black. You stood barefoot in snow until you forgot what warmth felt like. You learned anatomy not from books, but from corpses, watching where the blood pooled, where the breath caught, where the eyes stopped seeing. And when you were ready, they gave you your first mark, a butcher, mean, loud, drunk before sunrise. They said he beat his wife, starved his apprentices, lied about weights to cheat villagers. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. The coin had already changed hands. The boy, now no longer a boy, waited until dusk. Watched the butcher lock the shop. Followed him, slow as dusk. When the moment came, it wasn't clean. The blade missed the artery. The butcher screamed. The boy panicked. It took 3 stabs, then 4, then 7. By the end, the cobblestones were red, and the butcher's face was more pulp than skin. He sat there afterward, hands shaking, blade dropped, face wet with something he didn't recognize at first. Not blood. Tears. They told him later it was normal. The first is always the hardest. What they didn't say is that it never truly gets easier. You just stop looking them in the eyes. He buried the name he once had, burned the rags he wore, learned new ones, wore cleaner clothes, took coin in gloved hands. He started to move like fog, there, then gone, silent, methodical, but something stayed. Not guilt. No, guilt is loud. Guilt demands to be heard. This was quieter. A question, maybe. A whisper in the back of his skull. How many more before I vanish completely? He kept a tally, not on paper, in his bones. Each name a shadow behind his eyes. Each face a flicker before sleep. The Brotherhood didn't celebrate him. There were no feasts, no praise. Just more names, more assignments, more darkness. He was good, too good. He was sent where others wouldn't go. Poisoned cups in royal banquets, silent arrows from cathedral towers, a noose in the rafters of a cardinal's manor. He stopped thinking of them as people. It helped, until one day. It didn't, but that part, we'll get to that. For now, know this. Behind every crown, behind every stained glass altar, behind every noble name etched in gold, there was someone like him, watching, waiting, breathing, and sometimes choosing not to kill, which, in this world, is almost worse. Absolutely. Here's part 2, picking up where part 1 left off, continuing in the same immersive, poetic, slow-paced voiceover tone. The story deepens, and the psychological toll becomes heavier. This segment is around 1,300 words, keeping the total pacing toward your 2-hour, 10-part goal. There's a moment when the blade pauses. It's not hesitation, not fear. It's something older than that. A question the hand asks the heart, even if it never speaks aloud. What if this one remembers me? What if this one looks at me and sees? He never let that pause last more than a breath, not until the abbess. She was old, fragile even, skin like waxed paper, but her eyes, they were sharp, blue, cold. And when she walked through the cloisters of Saint Vallier, it was like the wind itself stepped aside. Her name had been whispered in certain courts. They said she had once advised queens, before hiding behind robes and incense. But people don't pay coin for whispers. They pay for threats. They said she had secrets buried in parchment, letters that could break alliances, names that could stir rebellion. The Brotherhood didn't care what was in the ink, only that it stayed buried, permanently. He entered through the bell tower, waited in the rafters. Hours passed. His legs ached, dust thick in his throat. Monks whispered prayers below, never knowing death hung above them like a quiet moth. When she entered alone, he moved, dropped behind her without a sound. But she didn't flinch, she didn't run. She turned and smiled. "You came sooner than I thought," she said, as if greeting an old friend. They always do when the ink dries. He raised the blade. No flourish, just the quiet finality of metal drawn for the last time. But she stepped closer, not afraid. "I used to be you," she whispered. Not with knives, with words. The edge is different, but the blood spills the same. He didn't know why his hand trembled. Maybe it was the calm in her voice, the way she spoke like she'd already seen her own death. Maybe it was the way she touched his face, gently, reverently, and said, "You're not gone yet, but you're close, too close." He killed her, quick, clean. She didn't resist. And afterward, there was no coin, no message from the Brotherhood, no acknowledgement, only silence. For the first time, he didn't feel proud, didn't feel useful. He felt used. He left that night, walked 3 towns west, burned his cloak, threw the blade into a river so black it reflected no stars. He thought, Maybe this is it. Maybe I can be someone else. But peace doesn't come to ghosts. It follows you. In sounds, in smells, in the strange way your breath fogs in a warm room. You carry death like a second spine, always there, always whispering. He tried work, as a scribe, as a mason. He even tried confession. But every time he looked in a mirror, he saw the girl from the noble's bed. The one who didn't scream. The one who just watched. And the abbess, her soft voice, her smile, they weren't haunting him. They were witnesses. He stopped sleeping. Started drinking. He wasn't alone. The world was full of men like him, half dead, waiting for something to put them out of their misery. One night, in a tavern off the coast of Calais, he heard a laugh that cut through the noise like a blade. A woman's laugh. Not mocking, not drunk. Something else. Joy. Real joy. He turned and saw her. Hair the color of coal ash. Eyes that didn't flinch. She was laughing with another woman, arguing over some card game. He didn't know why he watched her. Why the sound made him feel like the stone in his chest might crack. He didn't speak to her that night. Or the next. But by the third night she noticed him. "You drink like someone who used to believe in something," she said, sliding onto the bench beside him, then stopped. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She kept talking. Told him her name, Elira. She wasn't kind, not exactly, but she was honest. That was rarer. She ran messages for merchants, smuggled letters, sometimes weapons, sometimes people. And she didn't care about his past. Because she had one too. They didn't fall in love, not in the storybook way. There were no fireworks, no soft music. Just a shared silence that wasn't hollow. For a while it worked. They lived in a fishing town with no church, no lord, no questions. He learned how to mend nets. She taught him to read the sea. And for the first time, he thought, maybe there was something after the blood. But peace doesn't last when your past has a ledger. One night he came home to silence. The door open, the fire dead, and on the table, a coin. Copper, with a scratch through the center. The Brotherhood's mark. He ran. To the docks, to the tavern, to the shoreline. No one had seen her, until an old man, blind in one eye, said he heard screaming, out near the cliffs. He climbed until his lungs gave out. There was nothing. No blood. No body. Just the wind. He stayed there until morning, knees in the dirt, face in his hands. And when the sun rose, he stood, and the man he had tried to bury returned, not with vengeance, with purpose. They had taken something that mattered, and now he would remind them why they had once feared the sound of silence. Anyone had given the order? It was him. They said he lived in Lyon now, hidden behind the guise of a dying priest. It took 3 bribes, 2 broken fingers, and 1 dagger at the throat of a corrupt bishop to find the chapel. It was smaller than he expected. Stone walls faded with rain, candles burned low, the smell of incense and mildew. And there, kneeling beneath a wooden cross, was the man they had once called the architect. Mathieu didn't rise, didn't flinch. He just looked over his shoulder and said, "You made a mess." He didn't respond, didn't draw his blade. There was something off. The old man sighed. "You think we killed her? You think this is justice?" He turned now, face pale, eyes sunk deep in their sockets like graves. "But we didn't take her. We warned her." The silence between them felt like a blade pressed against skin, not yet cutting, but ready. "What do you mean?" he asked. Mathieu stood slowly, joints creaking like old wood. "She was never just a smuggler. She knew things. Things we were meant to forget. Names, ledgers. She stumbled onto them." He felt his breath catch. "We told her to stop, to disappear, to leave you out of it. But she was proud, so proud." The old man's voice cracked, almost mournful. "She said love could save you." And then Mathieu stepped forward, held out something wrapped in cloth. It was her pendant. Carved bone, simple, worn. He had watched her fingers trace it 1,000 times in sleep. "She gave it to me," Mathieu said, "as proof. Proof she had let go of the fight. She left, east, across the border, took a new name, started over." The air felt too still. He wanted to believe it, more than anything, but the blade was already drawn. And Mathieu didn't resist. He closed his eyes, whispered something in Latin, and let the blade enter without struggle. The chapel echoed with the sound of one man exhaling for the final time. When it was over, he fell to his knees, not because of what he had done, but because of what it meant. She was alive, and he had built a mountain of corpses on the belief that she wasn't. What does a man become when the purpose that kept him upright turns to smoke? When the thing he mourned never died? He stayed in the chapel until the candles drowned in wax, until the blood dried on his hands like paint. He didn't cry. He didn't scream, but the quiet inside him cracked. The next morning he walked to the river, watched the sunlight hit the water, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Just once, because now he had something rarer than vengeance. Hope. Let me know when you're ready for part 4. We'll follow the thread east, into exile, memory, and what it really means to start over. Anyone had given the order? It was him. They said he lived in Lyon now, hidden behind the guise of a dying priest. It took 3 bribes, 2 broken fingers, and 1 dagger at the throat of a corrupt bishop to find the chapel. It was smaller than he expected. Stone walls faded with rain, candles burned low, the smell of incense and mildew. And there, kneeling beneath a wooden cross, was the man they had once called the architect. Mathieu didn't rise, didn't flinch. He just looked over his shoulder and said, "You made a mess." He didn't respond, didn't draw his blade. There was something off. The old man sighed. "You think we killed her? You think this is justice?" He turned now, face pale, eyes sunk deep in their sockets like graves. "But we didn't take her. We warned her." The silence between them felt like a blade pressed against skin, not yet cutting, but ready. "What do you mean?" he asked. Mathieu stood slowly, joints creaking like old wood. "She was never just a smuggler. She knew things. Things we were meant to forget. Names, ledgers. She stumbled onto them." He felt his breath catch. "We told her to stop, to disappear, to leave you out of it. But she was proud, so proud." The old man's voice cracked, almost mournful. "She said love could save you." And then Mathieu stepped forward, held out something wrapped in cloth. It was her pendant. Carved bone, simple, worn. He had watched her fingers trace it 1,000 times in sleep. "She gave it to me," Mathieu said, "as proof. Proof she had let go of the fight. She left, east, across the border, took a new name, started over." The air felt too still. He wanted to believe it, more than anything, but the blade was already drawn. And Mathieu didn't resist. He closed his eyes, whispered something in Latin, and let the blade enter without struggle. The chapel echoed with the sound of one man exhaling for the final time. When it was over, he fell to his knees, not because of what he had done, but because of what it meant. She was alive, and he had built a mountain of corpses on the belief that she wasn't. What does a man become when the purpose that kept him upright turns to smoke? When the thing he mourned never died? He stayed in the chapel until the candles drowned in wax, until the blood dried on his hands like paint. He didn't cry. He didn't scream, but the quiet inside him cracked. The next morning he walked to the river, watched the sunlight hit the water, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Just once, because now he had something rarer than vengeance. Hope. He didn't head east right away. He waited, for days, maybe weeks, in the woods outside Lyon, where no names were spoken and the crows didn't scare easy. He needed to believe it, that she was alive, that somewhere, beyond the reach of blades and whispers, there was a place where her laughter hadn't died, that the pendant was more than a token, that it was proof. But belief for men like him was a fragile thing. Too many times he had been told it's safe now. This is the truth. Just one more kill and you're free. So he waited, let the silence grow thick around him, let the hunger gnaw, let the cold bite. And then, one morning, before the fog lifted from the riverbed, he began walking east. No weapons, no cloak, just a name she'd once mentioned in sleep, Villanova. A market town near the border, a place with no history, she had said once. Somewhere quiet. He'd almost missed it, tucked away in a late-night mumble, the kind that slips between dreams and memory. But now it burned in his mind like a star. Villanova. He crossed burned villages and broken roads, shared fires with deserters and thieves, swapped lies for bread, silence for safety. Every step forward felt like dragging his soul behind him through mud. But he never turned back. It took 47 days. On the 48th, he saw the rooftops. Small, slanted, red tile and wooden beams worn smooth by wind. Villanova. He didn't enter with a name. Didn't speak right away. Just watched, listened. The town moved like a dream barely clinging to itself. A place where no one asked where you came from, only if you could carry a basket or fix a hinge. And there by the well, in the faint gold of late afternoon, she stood. Elira. Hair shorter now, darker, clothes simple. She was laughing again. This time with a child, a girl, no older than 6, tossing pebbles into a bucket, chasing the ones that missed. No fanfare, no guards, no masks, just her. And the child. His legs failed before his voice did. He collapsed behind the barrel before she could see him. Watched from the shadow, heart trying to beat through his ribs. The sound of her voice pulled something loose in him, something rusted shut, something he thought he'd buried in blood. He stayed there for hours. Didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. That night he slept beneath the porch of an abandoned stable. Let the smell of hay and old wood soak into his bones. And for the first time in years he dreamed, and there was no screaming. The next day he returned, watched again. Closer now. He saw the way she bent to kiss the child's forehead, the way she checked the windows twice before going inside, the way her hand lingered too long on the door frame, like she still expected it to vanish. He wanted to run to her, wanted to say, "It's me, I'm here, I found you." But something held him back. What if she didn't want to be found? What if she had chosen this life? The quiet, the new name, the unspoken past. He didn't know what to be anymore. Savior, ghost, stranger. The third morning she saw him. He hadn't hidden well. Part of him didn't want to. Her eyes caught his across the crowd at the baker's stall. She froze, not afraid, just stunned, like seeing a name carved into a tree you forgot you ever loved. She didn't approach. Not right away. She walked the child home, waited an hour, then came back, alone. He was still there, sitting on the edge of a fountain. When she sat beside him, they didn't speak for a long time. The wind moved. The town breathed. Finally, she whispered, "I thought you were dead." He didn't look at her, just stared into the water. "I was." She nodded, slowly, as if mourning it again. "I left because I had to," she said. "I thought, if they knew I cared for you, they'd hurt you. I thought you'd be safer without me." "I wasn't." She closed her eyes. The silence between them stretched, but it didn't break. "You killed Mathieu," she said. He nodded. "They'll come for you, eventually." "I know." "And if they find me?" "They won't." She turned to face him now, eyes tired, older, wiser. "Why did you come?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Didn't know how. "Because I saw you in every shadow. Because your voice never left. Because hope is a quiet blade and it kept cutting." Instead he said, "I wanted to know if you were real." She touched his hand. Not like a lover, like someone who once knew him better than he knew himself. "I am," she said. He stayed in Villanova. Not in her home, not right away. He rented a corner above the cobbler's, paid with what coin he had left, worked with his hands, mending nets, fixing wheels, the kind of labor that leaves no trace. And every day he saw her, sometimes just a glimpse, sometimes more. The child, her daughter, was named Anais. She had his eyes. He never asked, she never explained. It didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet, the chance to rebuild, to feel something soft again. But peace is never permanent, and shadows remember. Peace makes a sound, not loud, not sudden, more like the absence of sharp things, no alarms in the wind, no footsteps pressed into dirt with menace. Just breath, just rhythm, and for a while that's what life became. He rose with the fog, worked with calloused hands, ate in silence, laughed in small moments. He walked Anais to the market when Alira needed sleep, told her stories with monsters that weren't real, taught her how to listen to the wind before the rain. At night he stayed outside the house, never slept inside. It was her sanctuary, a place she had built with different bricks, a different name, a different story. He would not stain it with the scent of his past. Not yet. But she always left a candle for him by the window. That was enough. Still, some part of him never stopped listening, even in joy, especially in joy, because men like him know what comes next. Stillness is not a reward, it's bait. It draws the wolves to the door. The first sign was a coin, just a coin, left on the edge of the fountain in the square, polished, untouched, the mark etched into the silver, a snake swallowing its tail. He didn't pick it up, didn't need to. It was a message, not a trap. They knew. He didn't tell Alira, not then. Instead, he buried the coin beneath the apple tree outside the church. No prayers, just earth. The next day, he found a black feather on his windowsill, then a smudge of ash on the threshold. Old symbols, old warnings. They were watching. He began walking the perimeter again, counting the steps from door to barn, noting which trees had broken branches, which shadows moved wrong. The rhythm returned, the rhythm of paranoia dressed as preparation. But this time, he wasn't alone. Alira noticed before he spoke. "You're watching again," she said quietly one morning as she kneaded dough. "Your hands forget how to be still." "They left signs," he said. "The Brotherhood, they're circling." She didn't cry, didn't panic. She just wiped her hands on a cloth and said, "How long?" "Days, maybe a week." She nodded. "Then we need to go." He almost asked where, but the look in her eyes told him, anywhere but here. They had done it once. They could do it again. But this time, there was Anais, who had never seen a blade drawn in anger, who didn't know what it meant to burn your own name behind you, who thought the world was mostly kind, and who would not survive if it wasn't. He looked at Alira. "We need to tell her," he said. That night they did. They told Anais the truth in the language of stories, that there were people who hunted shadows, that her mother and father had once been shadows too, that the world didn't like when ghosts tried to become people again. Anais didn't cry. She just asked, "Are they coming to take you?" He paused, then said, "No, they're coming to try." She seemed to accept that. The next morning they prepared to leave. No wagons, no gold, just what they could carry. Alira packed herbs, linens, and the only drawing Anais had ever made. A crooked house with 3 people standing outside, holding hands. He took nothing, only a knife, a coil of twine, and the torn pendant she'd once given away in fear and returned in faith. But before they could go, it happened. The fire came first, a bloom of light in the dark. Not their house, not yet. The granary. It burned fast, too fast for wind alone. Then the barn behind the chapel. Then the old bakery. The town erupted into panic. Screaming, bells, buckets filled with water that evaporated before reaching the flames. But he didn't run toward the fire. He looked for the gaps, the silent corners, the ones who weren't panicking, and he saw them. 3 men, unarmed, faces blank, standing still in the chaos, not watching the fire, watching him. He met their gaze. And just like that, the stillness inside him cracked open. Alira grabbed Anais. He grabbed them both. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. They ran. Through the alley, past the weaver's shop, down the trail behind the mill that only deer used in summer. But the Brotherhood knew the trails. Of course they did. They had mapped every escape, planted men like seeds in the soil, waiting. One stepped into their path, blade drawn. Anais screamed. Elira raised her hands. But he didn't hesitate. The knife in his hand moved before thought returned. One strike, one breath, one body left behind in the dirt. They didn't stop. They ran until the trees closed in, until the smoke was a memory, until even Anais stopped crying, too tired to weep. They camped near a stream that night. No fire, no words, just silence, and the soft breathing of a child asleep in fear. Elira sat beside him, hands trembling. "We can't keep running," she whispered. "I know. They'll never stop." He nodded, then said, "Maybe they don't have to." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You want to fight them?" "No," he said. "Then what?" He stared at the water, at the broken reflection of a man who no longer feared death, only loss. "I want to end them." Elira didn't argue, didn't plead. She just said, "Then I'm with you." He looked over at Anais, small, hurled into herself like a question the world had no answer for. "We don't bring her," he said. Elira's voice cracked. "Where will she go?" "She has an aunt. In Kallenborg." "You said once." "Yes. Years ago." "We find her. We beg. We pay. Whatever it takes." And then he looked up. The wind was rising, and in it he heard the sound of footsteps not yet taken and bones not yet broken. "Then we pull the Brotherhood out of the dark," he said. "We tear the roots out. You can't kill all of them." "No," he said quietly, "but I can light the match." And in the water, his reflection finally stopped trembling. The road to Kallenborg was long and strange. It moved like a river through hills and bone-colored fields, curving past broken stones and hollow chapels, where no prayers had been whispered in decades. They traveled at night, slept by day. Elira carried Anais close, wrapped in old linen, eyes scanning the tree line with every footstep. He carried nothing but silence. In the quiet, he remembered the way she once held a blade like it was part of her body, the way she disarmed men twice her size with nothing but timing, the way they bled together in snow and never spoke of pain. But now, and she moved differently. Every glance was for Anais, every instinct bent toward protection, not victory. It wasn't weakness. It was evolution. She had grown roots, and he had not. Kallenborg rose from the land like a half-forgotten promise, walled in pale limestone, wrapped in mist, guarded by nothing but time. He remembered it. Vaguely. Years ago, he passed through under another name, seeking someone he never found. Back then, it was just another dead end. Now, it felt like a doorway. They entered at dawn, when the gates were thinly watched, and the guards drunk with boredom. He kept his hood low. Elira said nothing. Anais clutched the broken pendant like it meant something. Maybe it did. They found the aunt on the third day. Not easily. It took silver, and lies, and patience. Her name was Morel, a seamstress who walked with a limp and trusted no one. At first she denied even knowing Elira, but blood remembers. After one look at Anais, her face cracked. A breath escaped her that sounded like grief made physical. "Gods," she whispered, "she has her father's eyes." Elira didn't correct her, didn't explain. There was no point. The next hour was spoken in low tones behind closed doors. Morel listened, then cried, then agreed. Anais would stay. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough for what? None of them said the word, but it sat between them, heavy and undeniable. Vengeance. The last night with Anais was the hardest. She didn't want to sleep, clung to her mother like thread to needle. He didn't try to explain. What do you say to a child before walking into darkness? So he told her one last story. About a wolf who protected a meadow from ghosts. About a wind that could blow away names but never love. About a fire that didn't burn, only lit the way home. She listened, and when she finally slept, it was deep, unbroken. The kind of sleep only children and the dead ever truly know. At dawn they left. No goodbyes, no promises, just the road, and the weight of silence between them. For 3 days they said almost nothing. Only moved east, toward the lowlands, toward the forest where it all began, toward the place where the Brotherhood first took shape, like mold under stone. He remembered the names, the safe houses, the signals carved into trees. They weren't memories. They were scars that had never healed. "You know this place," Elira said finally, as they passed a ruined well with a raven skull hung beside it. "I trained here," he said. She looked around. "So did I, long ago." He stopped. "You were one of us." She nodded. For a time. And just like that, the final veil between them fell. No more secrets, no more pretending. They were both ghosts, made of the same ash, raised by the same fire, and now walking back into it. They camped near the old boundary stone that marked the edge of the Brotherhood's first hunting ground. It was still there, carved with 13 notches, one for each of the original circle. He traced them with his finger. 7 are dead, he said. 3 disappeared, 3 remain. Elira's voice was quiet. "You know their names?" He nodded. "The vicar, the widow, and Liz." She froze. "Liz is alive." He looked at her, eyes sharp. "You knew her." "She taught me how to hold my breath for 5 minutes," she said, "and how to poison a priest without touching him. She taught me how to bury a name." Elira exhaled, then said, "We'll need help." He nodded. "Not allies," he said, "just believers." They started in the outskirts. In the ruins of places the Brotherhood had once raised, whispers still lived there. So did broken men, exiled soldiers, abandoned spies, half-mad saboteurs living on memory and rot-gut wine. They didn't ask for gold, only purpose. One by one they agreed, not because they hoped to win, but because dying with a reason is better than living without one. By the 10th day they had 7, by the 12th 15, and one message: "The serpent has returned, we carry fire." They struck first, a courier station in the valley. Just a warning, no deaths, only fire, only the smell of smoke, and a symbol painted on stone and tar. The same snake, now pierced by a sword. The Brotherhood answered. They always do. They sent a message, pinned to the chest of a child. "Come home," it read, "or we will bring the ashes to you." He didn't sleep that night, didn't speak. Elira sat beside him. "You can't protect everyone," she said. He shook his head. "I'm not trying to." "Then what?" He looked at her, eyes sunken, mouth dry, but still burning. "I'm trying to end it." She didn't argue, didn't offer comfort, just placed her hand over his and said, "War doesn't start with swords. It starts with silence, then eyes, then names spoken aloud that were meant to stay buried. And then, somewhere far from firelight, someone decides not to run." They chose the second strike carefully. Not a grand gesture, not a spectacle, just precision, a meeting place in the southern woods. Brotherhood Command didn't think anyone knew about it anymore. They used it once a month to train new recruits. Not children like before, but the broken, debtors, drunks, ex-soldiers, boys who'd killed in anger and couldn't stop dreaming about it. That's who they turned now, and he knew it. Because he used to be the one doing the turning. He watched from the trees. 6 men inside, 2 watching the perimeter. None of them old enough to know his name. That was the point. The Brotherhood recycled flesh, not memory. He waited for the moment between movements, when their attention sagged, when the rhythm dropped. Then he and Elira moved. Not loud, not frantic, just clean. 2 arrows, a knife, a final breath strangled before it escaped. Then silence again. Inside it was easier. A trapdoor in the floor. Documents, symbols, maps of nearby towns, each marked with numbers, names traded like livestock. They burned it all, except the names. Those they carved into memory. And as the fire climbed the walls, he stood in the center and whispered a word he hadn't said in 15 years. "Brother?" It wasn't nostalgia, it was mourning. Because what they were burning wasn't just a place. It was part of him, the part he had once believed in. They moved fast after that, no more hiding. Every raid was a message, every death, a sentence in a language only the Brotherhood could read. And with every strike, the whispers grew louder. They called him the Ghost of Thorns, called Elira the Blood Widow. Stories bloomed like rot in the towns they passed, of a faceless killer who walked through fire without burning, and a woman who could slit your throat from 20 feet away. Not accurate, not helpful, but powerful. Fear is currency, and soon they had enough of it to spend. By the 3rd week, the Brotherhood changed tactics. They stopped recruiting, stopped hiding, and started hunting. The first was a trap in an orchard. They poisoned the apples, spiked the well, left a girl in the field crying for help. But he smelled the oil in the dirt before they crossed the fence line. He turned back. watched from a hill as 5 men moved in to kill no one. There was no girl, just a doll wrapped in a bloodied shawl. He didn't speak for hours after that. When Elira finally touched his shoulder, he said, "They're not trying to stop us. They're trying to make us brutal." "And is it working?" He didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. Some days he could feel the edge coming back. That old cold thrill, the one that says you were made for this. But then night would fall, and the wind would shift, and he would hear Anais' voice again, soft, somewhere behind memory, calling him Papa, with no idea what that name used to mean. That's what kept him from becoming a monster again. Not mercy, not honor, just her voice. By the end of the 4th week, they had killed 17 men and burned 4 safe houses. But they were no closer to the 3 that mattered. The vicar, the widow, and Liz. Each time they reached a new town, the rumors changed. The vicar was seen in the north, bleeding from the mouth. The widow had married a merchant prince and poisoned him in his sleep. Lice had died, or was hiding, or was hunting them in silence, already close enough to taste their breath. He didn't know what to believe, until the dream. It came in the 5th week, on a night too quiet to trust. He dreamed of a cave, stone walls lined with oil lanterns, a long table, a silver mask, and behind it, her. Lise, older, colder, but unchanged. She didn't speak, just watched, until she raised her hand and pointed. At him, he woke with blood in his mouth. Elira stirred beside him. He said, "She's alive." "You saw her?" He nodded. "In a dream." Elira's expression didn't change. "In the old days," she said softly, "a dream like that was a summons." He didn't sleep again for 3 days. When he finally did, the dream returned. Same cave, same table. Only now she was closer, watching with those strange, unblinking eyes she used to wear like weapons. This time she spoke, but not in words. Just a sound, like stone breaking underwater. He woke trembling, and when he looked at his palm, a symbol had been drawn there, in ash, by no one. He didn't show Elira, not yet. Instead, he went into the forest alone, stood in the clearing where they'd once buried a traitor named Bram. The marker was gone, of course. The forest reclaims its shame, but the earth remembered. He knelt, closed his eyes, and said the old prayer, "We do not sleep, we do not speak, we do not serve, we remain." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a crow landed in the tree above and dropped a feather, black. Split, marked with the number 3, 3 days. That's how long he had, until Lise came, not to fight, to speak. Maybe, or maybe it was already too late for words. He returned to Elira at dusk, said only, "Prepare." For what? For her. Elira's eyes darkened. "I thought she was a myth." "She was," he said, "until now." That night, they packed, not weapons, just salt, rope, fireglass, and the old oaths, carved into bone. They didn't say goodbye to the others, just vanished, as they were trained to do. At the edge of the forest, where the crows no longer flew, he felt the pull, like gravity reversed, like memory sharpened, and in the silence he whispered the name that had once haunted him. Lace. The air answered with a breath that was not wind, a voice older than fear, a whisper that sounded like home and hell at once. And he knew. The next part wouldn't be war, it would be confession. The place was called Black Hollow, not officially. On maps it was just a ridge, a gap between hills where the fog never quite lifted. But among those who once carried knives in their teeth and secrets in their lungs, Black Hollow was something else. It was where the Brotherhood met when all other paths were broken. And that night, as they walked through the mist, neither of them spoke. Even the wind was afraid to whisper. Elira's boots made no sound on the moss-covered path. He didn't look at her. Didn't have to. He could feel her heartbeat, steady like a war drum somewhere far away. They reached the hollow just after dusk. It opened in silence, a bowl of stone and shadow. No trees, no birds, only the weight of memory pressed into dirt. And there she was, Lise, exactly as she'd appeared in the dream, standing like she'd been there for hours, or years. Older, yes, hair now streaked with gray, her face carved by time, not softened by it. But her eyes? Same as ever, unflinching, alive in a way most people forget how to be. Illyra stepped forward first, not out of trust, but out of fury. "You should be dead," she said. Lys smiled, not kindly. "So should you." He stayed back. Let the air stretch. Let the quiet breathe. Then stepped forward. "Why summon me?" Lys tilted her head. "I didn't summon you. You were always coming." The ground beneath him felt unstable, like standing on the lid of something old and waiting. He asked, "Was it all a game?" "No," she said. "It was a preparation." "For what?" "For what's next." Illyra scoffed. "You trained us to kill nobles and thieves. What could possibly be next?" Lys took a slow breath, then said the word like a knife slicing cloth. "Gods." Neither of them moved. He blinked once. "What?" "The Brotherhood was never about politics," she said. "Not really. The nobles were distractions, the church, a tool. The real purpose was containment." Illyra's voice was flat. "Containment of what?" Lys stepped forward, and for the first time she looked old. Not weak, but exhausted, like someone who'd kept a secret too long and now couldn't hold it any longer. "There are things beneath this land," she said, "older than empires, older than prayer." She looked at him. "You've seen glimpses, in dreams, in the mirror." His breath caught. The dream of the cave, the sound that wasn't a sound. "You mean the void?" She nodded. "We called it that once until we learned its name." Illyra laughed once bitterly. "Let me guess. You want to protect us from it. Is that why you bled children in the name of balance? Why you trained us to slit throats before we could write?" Lys didn't blink. "No. I bled children because I thought the gods needed sacrifice. I trained you because I thought precision could keep chaos out. I was wrong." He stepped forward, slow. "So what changed?" "You survived," she said. It wasn't flattery. It was indictment. "You were supposed to die," she said, "in that raid, or in the exile. The moment you stepped away, you should have unraveled. But you didn't. You reformed." She looked at Illyra. So did she. "And an ace," he said quietly. Lys nodded. "3 fragments of the same blade." The hollow seemed to deepen. The mist thickened, curling like breath from a long-dead mouth. Illyra's voice broke the spell. "If you're not here to kill us, then what are you here for?" Lys looked at them both, and for the first time, there was something in her face that wasn't strategy, or power, or even fear. It was sorrow. "There's a door beneath the old citadel," she said. "One that was never meant to open. But the Brotherhood, we were arrogant. We tried to study it, to control it." She paused. "We failed." The word landed like thunder swallowed into silence. He closed his eyes. The dreams, the sound of stone breaking underwater. The whisper that wasn't a whisper. It hadn't come from him. It had come through him. "How long?" he asked. "How long before it opens?" She didn't answer. She just held out her hand, and in it, a key, old, iron, rusted almost to dust, but carved with a symbol he recognized. 13 notches, one for each original brother. "This opens the gate," she said. "Then why give it to me?" "Because I won't make it there," she said. "And even if I did, I'm no longer the blade. I'm just the echo." He stared at the key. It burned cold in his chest. Illyra took a step forward. "You're asking us to fix what you broke." Lys didn't flinch. "No, I'm asking you to bury it, deep enough this time." "And if we refuse?" "Then it wakes," she said simply, "and the world becomes a whisper." He turned to Illyra. Her eyes met his. There was no argument between them, no plan, just a knowing, a reckoning shared in silence. He took the key, and Lys exhaled like a weight she'd carried her whole life had finally passed. Then she knelt, not like a servant, but like a soldier who'd finally reached the end of her orders. Illyra stepped back, wary. "Is this a trick?" "No," Lys said. "This is atonement." Then she reached behind her ear, pulled a slender blade from beneath her hay, and placed it on the ground. "For an ace," she said, then stood and walked into the trees. No farewell, no forgiveness, just footsteps fading into mist. He stared at the key, then at the place where Lys had vanished, and finally at the horizon, east, where the citadel lay in ruin, and beneath it, the door. He didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Illyra. When they finally turned to walk, she said only one thing. A whisper, almost to herself. If we open it, we don't walk back out. He nodded. I know. And in the dark, they began their final march. The road east was not made of dirt or stone. It was made of memory, and every step they took toward the citadel felt like walking through a dream they'd tried to forget. The world around them changed. Not visibly, not in the way maps record, but subtly, like something just out of focus. Trees grew quieter, birds no longer sang. The wind moved like it was carrying secrets instead of air. By the third day, the path was gone. By the fifth, time had stopped moving normally. He stopped counting the sunrises. Elira didn't ask how much further. She knew better than to speak while the road listened. Instead, she kept her hand near her blade and her eyes scanning the mist, as if afraid the shadows might start remembering who they used to be. When they finally saw the citadel, it didn't rise so much as emerge. Not a ruin, a monument half sunk in the earth, as if the ground itself had tried to forget it. Its towers were broken, its gate long rusted, but it was not empty. They felt that before they stepped inside, a pressure, like standing too close to thunder that hadn't clapped yet, like a heartbeat in the walls. He paused. This is where they made us. Elira's voice was distant. No, this is where they unmade us. The doors creaked open, though neither of them touched them. And so they entered the citadel of silence. Inside, time had not passed. Or perhaps it had passed too much. The air was dry and thick. Dust floated like ash from forgotten fires. The walls bore the symbols of the Brotherhood, but beneath them, older marks. Scratched, etched, burned in bone language. Neither of them spoke of what they saw. Not the chained rooms, not the claw marks, not the skeletons that were not quite human. To speak of it would have made it real. And still they descended. The stairs were cold and endless, spiraling deep, beyond architecture, into the bedrock of things, until they reached the gate. It wasn't what he expected. No iron bars, no lock, just a great black stone, seamless, smooth, like it had grown there rather than been placed. But it pulsed. Not with light, with something deeper, a rhythm that matched the ache in his jaw, the pressure behind his eyes. He stepped closer, and the key grew warm in his hand. Elira put her hand on his shoulder. This is the part where we don't come back. He nodded once, then pressed the key into the stone. There was no sound, no grinding, no unlocking. The stone simply melted, folded inward like water turning inside out. And behind it, darkness, but not empty. No, not empty at all. The space beyond the door was alive, but not with flesh, not with voice. Alive like rot is alive, like fire is alive. They stepped through, and the air disappeared. No breath, no time, no direction. Just endless black, not colorless, but full of shapes that had forgotten how to be seen. They were not alone. Something moved, not toward them, but around them. Observing, not with eyes, but with hunger. Then a voice, not spoken, felt. You are what they left behind. Elira flinched. He swallowed hard. Who are you? We are what was buried, what they feared, what they built temples to forget. Another shape. Closer now. Not a body, a presence. The Brotherhood was not our jailers. They were our worshippers, until they turned coward. Elira spoke. You're the reason they trained assassins. No, they trained keys. You were never meant to survive. You were meant to unlock. The space quivered. He stepped forward. And if we don't, then the gate will find another. There it was. The truth. All their pain, their missions, their exile. All of it had been ritual, a blood-worn path to this moment. The final blade, offered not in rebellion, but in invitation. He turned to Elira. She looked pale, but unbroken. We still have a choice, she said. He looked into the void, into the shape that was no shape, and whispered, do we? Then something changed. The void shifted, became clearer, not a place, a memory. His memory, childhood, the training room, the cold hands of the instructors, the chant, the blood, the candle that would never blow out. Then Elira's face, the day they buried Anais. And then something else, a memory that wasn't his, but it was him. Standing before Lise, a boy of 10, holding a blade. And Lise saying, you will never belong to the world. You were born for the space beneath it. He staggered back. No, he whispered. The void moved with him. You are not the blade, you are the door. Elira reached for him. Fight it. But it was already in him, in the crack behind his ribs, in the dreams. In the silence he thought was peace but had always been watching. He fell to his knees, and in that moment he saw everything. The Brotherhood's founding, the first gate, the thing that whispered to them from below, promising order in exchange for obedience. The great lie that began with protection but ended in worship. And now he was the last step, the final seal. "Kill me," he said. Illyra shook her head. "No." "I'm the door," he said, trembling. "If I die, it stays shut." She knelt beside him, tears on her cheeks. "I won't do it. You have to." But she didn't draw her blade. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him, held him, and in the dark, she sang. Not a song of the Brotherhood, but one they sang when Anais was small. The lullaby of the streets, the sound of home, not training, of life, not war. The void screamed, not in sound, but in rejection. The memory began to crack. Light, not holy, but human, split through the dark, and the voice faltered. "You are ours." "No," Illyra said. "He is his." The space began to collapse, not implode, retreat, as if it had tasted something bitter, and the stone reformed, the door sealed, not with ritual, but with love. He collapsed, and for the first time in days, breathed. The light didn't stay. It never does. It came like a breath held too long, sweet, sharp, blinding, and then it was gone. But something had changed. The weight in the air had lifted. The presence was no longer watching. The door was sealed, yes, but not locked in fear. Locked in truth. They lay there for a long time, him and Illyra, neither speaking, just listening to the absence of the voice. And for the first time, that absence felt like peace. When they finally stood, the citadel was crumbling. Not violently, not in anger, just letting go. Stone flaking to dust, symbols fading, bones dissolving into ash, as though the place itself had been held together only by the memory of its secrets. And now, with those secrets exercised, it was finally allowed to forget. They didn't run. They walked, side by side, through the hallways where they had once trained, once bled, once believed. They passed the old training chamber, where boys had become weapons and girls had been stripped of names. It was empty now. Not abandoned, healed. The wind moved through the open doorways like a sigh, and the light, gray and soft, filtered through the cracks above like forgiveness. No ghosts remained. Outside, the sky was pale with dawn. The forest, too, seemed to breathe again. Birdsong returned, timid at first, then stronger. The kind of sound you don't notice when you're running from something, but one you feel when you're finally still. They didn't speak until they reached the ridge. From there, the ruins of the citadel could still be seen. Only now, they looked like just another hill, forgotten by maps and memory. She broke the silence. "What now?" He looked at her. Older than the last time he saw her, though only days had passed. Or maybe it had been years, in the way pain rearranges you. "I don't know," he said. "Good," she answered. "We were never good at orders anyway." He laughed. Soft, honest. It felt like a betrayal, but also a release. The last time he'd laughed was he couldn't remember. They kept walking. Not toward anything, not away from anything. Just forward, through the trees, across the river, into the world that no longer hunted them. Or maybe into the world they no longer owed anything. They passed villages that didn't recognize them. Faces that looked past them, not with suspicion, but with neutrality. It was strange to be no one, to belong to nothing. Stranger still, to feel grateful for it. Nights were cold but not cruel. They made fires. They told stories, sometimes even the truth. They spoke of Aeneas and Lys and the others, of the way the Brotherhood twisted love into duty, of the day the door opened, and of the song that closed it again. Eventually they reached the coast, a quiet town where the sea didn't ask questions and the people had no temples. She found work as a healer. He took odd jobs, fixing nets, building boats, tending the docks. They never spoke of their names, only who they were now. No blades, no missions, no lies. Just days, one after another. And in that rhythm, something like redemption. Years passed, not fast, not slow, just enough to let the past turn soft around the edges. Some nights he still woke in a sweat. The dreams never fully left. But she would be there, a hand on his shoulder, a reminder that they survived. One morning he found her sitting by the shore, staring out at the ocean, hair streaked with gray, eyes distant. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "No, I miss what we thought it was, but not what it really was." He nodded. That was enough. That night they watched the stars, and she asked him something she hadn't in years. "Do you remember the prayer?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Not for glory, not for gold, not for empire, not for oath, for the one who will never be named, for the wound that does not bleed, for the silence that ends the blade." She closed her eyes. "It was never a prayer," she said. "I know," he replied, "but it sounds like one now." The wind carried their voices out to sea, and the sea didn't answer. But it didn't need to. Because some stories don't end with justice. Some don't end with revenge. Some simply end. And that, finally, was enough. So if you find yourself walking the old roads, if you hear whispers in stone, if you come across a crumbling gate in the woods where nothing grows, remember this: not every shadow hides a monster. Sometimes it hides a survivor. And sometimes, if you listen closely, the silence says thank you. Dim the lights. Let the credits roll. You were never supposed to find this story. But now that you have, don't forget it. Not all blades leave scars. Some leave peace.